So hi everyone, I'm Rozanne Hay. I've covered some of the teaching actually. I think for the last 2 years I've been doing all the courses, but this year just the evening, some of the evening courses. And what else? I'm mother to 4 children. I am director of continuing education for the International Association of Child Sleep Consultants. So I do a lot of managing our members' ongoing training, having guest speakers in, and just keeping on top of best practice. What have I done? I've sort of helped quite a few training companies. I actually worked out today as many as 6 with their programs, content, and also if I haven't just assessed their programs, I've also helped them with their books. So that was quite interesting. I sort of had crept up and I hadn't realized. And then I've appeared in a few books and helped edit a few books as well. And what else? And some social media work. And I've also worked for a health provider called Peppy Health. And then for the social media, the main ones really is for mums in the US. I have a few other bits and pieces, but that's the bread and butter. So today I'm going to be covering a sleep case study for a baby of about 4 months old. I've recently worked with this client, a similar client, and it's actually, I get a few case studies that overlap. So I thought it would be a really good one to cover with you, only because it is one of those topics, with the 4 months where parents are understanding that children have come out of their sleep progression and either sleep improves or it gets worse for that particular family and that particular child, and they understand that actual natural rhythms are forming and they want to tap into those natural rhythms to try and support their child to be able to create some rhythm throughout the day. So this is generally what we tend to see, and in this case the client is wanting something similar, just trying to support her child to be able to settle more independently. We'll cover this briefly. So when I sort of start off, I will either talk through the questionnaire with the family. It really depends how tired they are and how frazzled, I guess. And if they don't want to fill out the form, we'll just run through it about 20 minutes and just pick up questions as we go through it. I do have the questionnaire later in these slides, so we'll go through it with you. And depending, on those type of questions, it will sort of bounce off to the next stage. So if we know there was nothing in a certain area, let's say the birth and the pregnancy, I wouldn't persist with those questions. I'd move on to other questions just to get a good understanding, a good history of pregnancy, birth, the first few days after birth. And in a case like this, I did chat with the mum and followed up with a case with this questionnaire. She filled that in and I still needed to call back and just make some clarifications. So we'll share this as we go along. So yeah, it's just a planning how we're going to explore the sleep issues and just try to understand what's going on. So once it comes in, a case scenario comes in and the mum's discussing, or the carer is discussing what's happening, I try and unpick it. What really is presenting? Where is the problem? Is this normal? Because really from about 4 to 6 months, we can really only sleep shape. We support children to tap into their natural rhythms, which are starting to form around about 16, 17 weeks. And if we manage to get that all in place, then we don't need to sleep train at 6 months, which I think is a far more gentle kind of way of managing this. And it just brings some calmness for the whole family too. So we also do need to normalize as well. It is normal for children to still wake up and feed. It is normal for babies to still need comfort and support. And just support parents to continue to be responsive to their baby's needs. Okay, so how we would go back here. So how would we identify the issues and the possible causes? Again, this will come through the questionnaire when we start working through it. I'll help you identify the red flags and what may be going on. Okay. A considerable aspect of it would be actually having a look at the daytime rhythms and the nighttime rhythms, and what we could loosely expect of a child of this age. There will be variations. However, it would be helpful to know if there's any particular long stretches, when they're happening, even if it's from 11 till 3 in the morning, or 11 to 6 with a feed in the middle. That's really great. You want to hold on to the information you're able to draw from whatever's being presented. So just look for every little bit. We need to take an overview, step back, and just try and piece it together, get a good overview of the day and night rhythms. Is there any regulation involved? So when I ask this question and I reflect on it, I will be looking for nap times. Is there consistency with these nap times? Are the nap times approximately the same length, same time-ish each day? Is there changes from week to week, especially around the 16, 17 week mark, 18 week mark? There will be changes because they'll be moving out of their sleep progression around 16, 17 weeks. And there will be changes happening. Sometimes their capacity to stay awake longer, roughly about 2 hours is normal for this age. And those are all really positive signs. So we'd be looking for that, saying, has the baby developed maturity? Are they ready to be supported on to the next stage with their rhythms? And are the wakings at night? I know we talk about behavioral wakings. It's a loose term really, because behavioral wakings tend to happen after 6 months. So before 6 months, these things can usually be broken in a day or two, repositioned, like with attachments, dummies, whatever it might be. But we're looking for consistency with those wakings. So it's a loose term, as I said. And is there consistency? Are they waking the first half of the night? Is the pattern to the second half of the night similar as well? So we really are trying to draw a loose understanding of their day and night schedules, and we're going to try and build on what's presenting. So when is sleep taking place, and just create some understanding about what is present, and we'll try and build on that. Another really important point is actually not focusing on detail at the beginning. So we really need to stand back and take an overview. And it's so easy to get caught up. Baby's going to sleep at 7, waking up at 7:20, 7:48, 8:40. That's really neither here nor there. When is baby finally falling asleep? 9:30. That's what we need to know. And then the other part of it can be managed at another time. That's really not what we need to know at this stage. They're just not managing any length of sleep at that time. And there could be many reasons for that. It could be the overtiredness. There could be crutches are going to sleep, maybe to do with the daytime quality naps, all sorts. And also some children, their rhythms are a little bit later. They've got used to sleeping later and then suddenly aren't able to bring sleep that much earlier. It takes a few days for that adjustment. Okay, so approaching a sleep plan. So the other, so again, taking an overview at the beginning and addressing the details on the finer stages. So really the end part would be the fine tuning. So once we've identified roughly what is happening, what we can work with. Is there a problem here? Could there be something that is interfering that we might have missed? And this is where the question is really helpful. So we'll be focusing on the APGAR. Was there anything flagged in the APGAR score? And that is the score that's offered in the first 10 minutes after birth. I think it's 5 minutes and 10 minutes after birth. And that may be indicative of some trauma around birth itself. Was there any intervention around birth? Now, again, that question would be helpful, especially if the baby was unsettled for the first few days or the first few weeks after birth. That would suggest there's probably some tension involved. Again, early for dates, that would then lean on to sensory. Is there heightened sensory? Is there a reason why a particular baby might need a lot of sensory input? Sometimes it can just be overtiredness itself that's presenting as a sensory need. So again, that's not always clear. And it is through trial and error that becomes clear that actually there might not be that much sensory going on. It is just overtiredness. Again, side dominance, again, would tap into the birth intervention. If there was any muscular tension and the head might be more dominant to one side or the other, that would may well be interfering with their ability to sleep well. And allergies, intolerances, reflux, and tongue-tied, the big three, we're seeing a lot of as well. So that will all likely impact a baby's well-being and ability to feel calm and safe and in need of a lot of support. So if we're able to identify any of those, it would then sort of inform the way we would then move forward with this case. How we sort of anticipate, if we're going to have allergies and reflux, we can anticipate there's going to be certain markers along the way, trajectory we would need to follow, tongue tie as well. So all this would sort of inform that, again, what may well be going on with their rhythms, why they're able to regulate or they're not able to regulate if they need support. So again, we may be able to address those individually. So the case study, so gathering the information. So here's the first slide on the sleep questionnaire. So I've just got the date to work on, gestation, 40 weeks. So that's really good. Okay, so that baby is term. Natural delivery, forceps was used. So the fact forceps was used, it is a question I will follow up with to find out more details. And the APGAR score was really good. That's very interesting. So actually, on the surface, there may, it's hard to know. I'd say there's probably likely not much wrong with this baby. It probably just needs support to be able to sleep more independently. It may well have just, whatever might have happened initially, and it might have just gotten used to having that support to settle. So Mum's briefly described what a great experience she had with the birth. And that's really great. And she seems quite upbeat about, her baby's well-being and how the birth, and which is all good. She's just quite rational as well. She wasn't emotional, and she was in control, really. She was, even though she was exhausted, she was just managing. So this is when the aspects of the sleep study start to come together. So then we'd be looking at when we're trying to gain a history on the child's sleep problem. So baby's refusing to sleep in the cot during daytime naps. Well, that's not unusual. Only wants to be held and carried in the baby carrier. During the night, she can only connect 3 to 3.5 hours sleep. So we've already had a look at what she is sleeping, at what times of night she's sleeping, when that 3 to 3.5 hour stretch is happening. She's in her 4th month sleep regression. She was actually out of it. Mum thought she was there because the 4th month's a little bit misleading, because 4 months is 16 weeks, isn't it? So they think it's 16 to 20. She also resists going to sleep both during the day and night, regardless of being tired. So again, what's going on there? Were there crutches in place? When did this begin? So that's really helpful, getting a history, see if there was anything that might have triggered it. She did talk about, I'm not sure if it's covered there, covered. She did talk about baby having reflux around 6 weeks, which I thought was really interesting, because it just seemed to be a temporary period of that. The parenting styles is really helpful, because that again informs how to move ahead with the parent, if they're more behavioral or wanting a more involved or responsive type of approach in supporting their child to sleep more independently. So I think she was sleeping next to parents, yes, and managed to transition to the cot. So when she's asleep in the bed, they transition her. The white noise. So with the white noise, I did question that. So I needed to know where it was positioned and how loud it was. Just to make sure, because we do sometimes see these under the pillow, placed under the pillow, which is really not good. So it should actually be the sound no louder than the sound of a power shower behind a closed door, and a good distance away from their bed or the cot. Discuss the child's sleep environment, white noise, so just needed support to sleep. Medicals all good. Describe the evening. So this is where it went on the evening, and finally she fell asleep at 9 o'clock. So really just looking at the information, So she's sleeping, breastfeeding, bottle to bed. So she's following the bath, eat, sleep in the evening. And that's fine. That can work fine for some children. I don't have a problem with them eating to sleep. I think if it becomes a problem, then we address it. Otherwise, that's all good. So those timings I'd be looking at, just to try and I'll probably come back to those timings if I needed to try and manage the particular case study further, just to get an idea of, you know, around bedtime, but all that probably needs to be brought to earlier, and the daytime may well need to be readjusted. Just having a look here, rocking to sleep in mother's arms. So that for me was like, good, I'll start there with this one, falling asleep in mother's arms, bouncing on the ball. Well, the ball, we just want that out the place, but we will maintain the rocking, and then introduce a layering technique. So we will offer the patting alongside slowing down the bouncing and the rocking, and use that as transitioning to the cot. So that was really good to see, because that's a nice, easy way to transition and still maintain the input, the sensory input, with the layering, introducing the patting, reduce the bouncing, so the momentum, the vestibular part is still being maintained, but in a transferable technique. The dummy was the only, when I saw she had taken the dummy away as pacifier, I was like, oh no, oh no. Sometimes they can be quite handy to transition in the cots. So especially if they are dependent on sensory or vestibular or bouncing, whatever it might be, to fall asleep. It's sometimes much easier to offer that the pacifier and the dummy, and actually remove it just before sleep onset as a transitional stage. Anyway, she didn't want to go back. I did chat to her about that. She didn't want, which is fine, but that probably would have been my last choice to remove. So we had to move ahead without that. Okay, she wakes up after 20-30 minutes. She'll be waking up because the environment has changed. So if you remember, the environment needs to be consistent. Okay. So then it's just gathering more information, just understanding the nights, the wakings. So let's run through it quickly. Okay, so if you have a look at those nap times, lately it's 3 times a day, and she's been having really, really long naps, ridiculously long naps. So the first nap, I think, was 2 hours. And they're roughly, she was having about 5 or 6 hours sleep during the day over 3 naps. So you can understand why she was going to bed at 9 o'clock. So looking at it quickly, we think, well, actually, we know roughly children of this age, we need to be balancing about a 3-hour nap over first and second nap. So she's already having way too much of that. So I'd be trying to manage those naps, trying to reduce those, she's managing 2-hour wakings, which is perfect, trying to keep that pattern throughout the day, cap the naps using a gentle waking, if you remember what that is, planned waking, so don't wake from a deep sleep. And hold on, we just have a look lately. Yeah, we just need to manage those naps. There's just far too much daytime sleep happening. So she was going to feel a little bit jet lagged. So knowing what we do about the night wakings, remember we've covered the hypnogram, so we can draw on those night wakings. So actually now she's falling asleep at 9 p.m. Right, let's work on that. That'll be at the 0 at the bottom. And we've got an idea of when she is waking at nighttime. And even she's waking 3.5 hours into it. Remember, that's the REM. That would be the first REM transitional stage, which is great because that shows that there is some rhythms in place. And although she may well be having a short night ending at about 7, somewhere around there, there is some regulation happening. So that was encouraging. And with all this information, I thought, right, so that's encouraging. She's managed to stay awake for 2 hours. We'll be able to try and support her to tap into her natural rhythms. So I then decided to chat with mother and find out more details. So the forceps, she talked about having a light touch forceps. There was no bruising or swelling. And then I kept thinking, well, where did all this bouncing come from? Why did it need to start? She was no head dominance. APGAR was good. Balance at APGAR, and we may raise a red flag at this point, and should baby struggle with regulation. Right. So once we've addressed, we've implemented the changes, which so a little bit of sleep hygiene, trying to settle in the cot, create some structure to the day, balancing the sleep needs over the 2/3 naps, because the third one can be in the carrier on the pushchair, and that's fine. If we aren't able to resolve it, or there's progress and then regression after a week or 2 weeks, I would come back to the bouncing. I'd keep saying, where's this coming from? Could there be something that we've missed? So although the forceps and everything else looks good, could we have missed something? So with this one, I would just put on the back burner for now and say, well, listen, everything's looking positive to move ahead with creating some regulation. If it really is a struggle and things aren't working out, then we need to come back and see, could there be some sensory going on? Could we have missed something? Another big flag is she's a tummy sleeper from the beginning. She couldn't sleep on her side or back. We're getting a lot of that at the moment, a real lot of it. So it's a real struggle because it's totally against the safe sleep guidelines. Wake windows recently moved to 2.5 hours from 90 minutes. So that again was the other encouraging point. So demonstrate she's got the maturity and suggests that she's able to move out of her sleep regression and ready to move on to line with her natural rhythms, which we loosely talk about those wake windows was actually the sleep pressure building up, so anticipatory first nap, and then again another wake window, which is alongside the sleep pressure building up before they then go into an overtired state. So they overlap those two. And then the momentum again is tapping into the sensory to sleep is a significant issue. And I said, that's just something I'm going to have to put on the back burner and just plow ahead anyway. The dummy use, we talked about that, reflux, temporary at 6 weeks, which was interesting. But then with that, I think, where did that come from? Okay, I have heard that, from lactation consultant, that sometimes there's some changes, digestive changes. So there could have been other reasons for that. There's no cradle cap, no skin rashes. So actually looked like a really healthy, happy little girl who just probably needed a little bit more support. So the case study assessment, we then reflect on the parents' goals, who really want to master self-settling and reduce the need for physical contact to return to sleep. So with this, I suggested they need to think about setting their boundaries. So once they're in the cot, we'll support them in the cot and stay in the cot. Would probably work for that family or this type of situation, but be there, be present. So the parents' values around techniques, parent care involvement, actively involved, partially involved, or less involved. So this can change. A parent will start with say, well, actually, I want to be involved. However, again, with the techniques, suddenly they'll decide, as happened with this case, that after 2 days, I'm not ready to go to the next stage, which I understand. So I left her. It wasn't even 6 hours later. She messaged and said, oh, she's worse than ever. I don't know what's happened. I said, we need to move to the next stage. And she did the next day. And, she called and said, I couldn't believe it was that easy. I should have done this long ago. So it just shows. So sometimes they may well start off with one view and then it doesn't work for them. So you might need to review their position and their values and what is working. Sometimes they just need time to reflect. Are they comfortable with this change? And again, is the parents' goals in line with the child's capacity? That is a good point to keep reflecting on. Sometimes some children have higher needs and parents don't want to be that involved, and vice versa. So some children really do need to be left to settle, and they'll have a helicopter parent literally over them, fussing, touching, disturbing them, and that can upset them. And again, is a compromise needed? And again, that needs to be managed. Identifying the child's needs. So are there any medical needs or any raised fright and flight mode, which might be from reflux or discomfort? They might be more alert, more needy, more intense. Is the child secure? Are their needs met? And this child was perfectly secure, needs well met, lovely child. So I was absolutely safe, and whatever choice, whatever method they chose, whatever approach they need, this child would be absolutely fine for that. In this is the course likely behavioral or other. So in this case, when we talk about the other, it could be, well, we talked about it earlier about the reflex, head position, whatever else might fall into the other, but the behavioral would be the association of actually going to sleep with support and needing support to keep sleeping, which is, again, okay. It's just identifying that that may be the need. So the case study itself, so when we're drafting the sleep plan, we just need to be mindful. I would have had this conversation with the parents beforehand about their values and their goals, and I would have identified this before I created the sleep plan. So you really are drawing on information they are offering, so really just mirroring the information they've given you. Identifying a most pressing issue, so regulating the daytime schedule. So under 6 months, we need to regulate the daytime first. So we know roughly they have capacity to say wake this little girl about 2 hours a day, 2 hours at a time before naps. And that's perfect. That's exactly where we want her to be. So we just tapped into that. And then we offered the first nap. The first 2 days, as a mum wanted to be involved, I said, that's fine. Well, let's start and offer that. You can still carry on holding her in your arms for the first 2 days, but let's try and work on the capping those naps and keeping some structure to the day. And that worked really well for those first 2 days. The third day, she really was ready to now sleep in the cot. And that's where it went a little bit, mum needed another day to reflect. So communication with a parent carer about their technique suits them best. Yeah, I think parents really need to understand what's involved and just reflect if it feels comfortable with them, if it aligns with their values and where they're at as well. And sometimes both parents don't agree, so you might need to consider that too and hear both parents' views. Parent carer, is it what's their timeline for change? So in this case, the mum had set a week aside, which is really helpful. Balance was involved, balance with involvement levels. Exactly, we talked about that earlier. Just need to balance that and then normalize. We really need to normalize wakings. So ideally, some parents will say, I want the child onto one nap. You're right. You okay for time, Chris?
Yeah,
Hi.
we're 8 o'clock, but yeah, go for it.
A few minutes, we're nearly there. So really need to normalize babies, especially of this age, their wakings and their neediness. And I think we need to support that alongside creating a little bit of an independence as well, if that's what the parents are looking for. And yeah, normalizing is really important. And when we're thinking of that, Basis Online is a really good resource for normalizing. So if you need any more information on it, do look there. Parent carer support level from the sleep consultant. Again, trying to establish how much support you offer them. In this particular case, I did a WhatsApp support and then phone. So she checked in once a day, and she just let me know what was happening. So we had the pre-meeting over the phones, 20 minutes, what was expected of her on day 1, day 2, day 3, she changed her mind, day 4, we had a meeting on the night of day 2, and that was really all she needed. And I think as long as they've got some change and they're able to work with it, they're happy to stay at certain levels, and then gradually work towards sleep shaping at this stage. Okay, any questions?
All right, thank you very much, Rozanne, for that. Really, really insightful. So we have a couple that have come through already. So one is the importance of use of dummy from day 1, saying there's some others that don't want to use the pacifier, but can we argue with that?
So again, this is where we walk a very, very tight line, because the lactation consultants and midwives will say that dummy may well interfere with the sucking and nipple confusion, and they really recommend dummy after 1 month. However, if you go to NICU, they'll be offering dummy, because dummy keeps the airways open to help with the sensory consolidation, especially for babies who are early, because their sensory needs haven't fully matured. They tend to mature around 40 weeks. Or 38 to 42 thereabouts. So they may well be on the back foot. So the dummy actually plays a really, really important part. It's just such a fine line. So if you have a mum or a parent who doesn't want the dummy, sometimes I explore that, because they have images of a child in a pusher running around with a dummy in their mouth all day long, 4 or 5 years old, and they don't want that. And what probably needs to be discussed is that actually dummy does have its place. It really helps support with sensory consolidation, especially if there's reflux going on, digestive problems, or even the raised sensory of babies early for dates. It does have an important part to play. Removing dummy needs to be done by 5.5 months, because habits form around 6 months, and then it becomes a good old struggle to get rid of it. But it's much easier to do that in a day or two, super max, before 5.5 months. So yes, it does have its place. It's just sometimes it's about education and explaining to them why.
Okay, great. Okay, we've got one more is about tummy sleeping. How do you advise tummy sleeping with parents?
Oh, good question. I've had a few. I've had a few. So the first one told me that her midwife said it was okay. It was better to get sleep than no sleep. They're in a worse situation not getting any sleep. The next one told me her GP said, well, you know, the risks are small and this and that. And I said, well, as long as, and I sent the information, the safe sleep guidelines, I recommend this, I can help you with, transitioning. In this particular case, we managed to get baby on her side. And alongside that, she was rolling, surprise, surprise. I taught her the rolling technique and the importance of rolling left and right and being able to recover. And I said within 2-3 days, baby will be rolling backwards and forwards and to both sides. So really keep assisting with that technique, because if they're able to lift the head and roll back, and once they've rolled over onto their tummy, that's okay.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, I do teach them the technique. And I encourage them to put baby down on the back, and if they roll over and they're able to recover, then it's... Yeah.
So that answer and the other answers and all the content just goes to show that even though we try and create this kind of like black and white, this is how you do things, there's so many nuances that it makes it lots of information, and some of it's contradictory, unfortunately.
It's very difficult and really has to be decided on a case by case. And I think it's a balance. And if nipple confusion is a problem for some children, then that needs to be seen individually and managed alongside. I think there's a concern because this type of information is always targeted at the type of parent who's going to put the dog's bowl in with the baby's bottles. But it is everybody else who's following the advice, and it needs a little bit of common sense as well. So yes, if you've got an unsettled baby, putting a dummy in, offering a dummy is not the end of the world, and it's not going to become a problem.
Thank you for watching our video. For more London School of Childcare Studies content, see our social media or visit our website childcarestudies.co.uk.